It sounds peaceful, doesn't it? To believe there is someone up there watching over everything, someone who ensures justice, someone who will hold your hand when you cry. But the truth is, holding on to this belief is the hardest thing in the world. And if you've educated yourself even a little bit, if you have access to information, this path becomes even more brutal. Because when you open your eyes and actually look at this world, you don't see answers, you see questions. You see a starving child taking their last breath while the heavens remain silent. You see a cruel man sitting in a palace laughing while the supposed wrath of God stays quiet. For centuries, people have pinned their hopes on him. They've begged, they've screamed, but so often it feels like we are just shouting in an empty room where no one is listening. Winston Churchill once said, "The destiny of mankind is not settled by lucky guesses, but by the cold logic of facts." And cold logic tells us a devastating story. It tells us that if there were a truly merciful power, it would surely hear the cry of a mother begging for her child's life. If there were a protector, he would step in before the innocent are slaughtered for no reason. When you aren't educated, you don't question. You just accept what you're told. But when you gain knowledge, when you look at science and history, your own mind starts to turn against you. It asks, if he exists, why doesn't he speak? Why doesn't he come to help? Evil is happening everywhere. Humanity is bleeding. And yet, we sit here clinging to an old hope. It starts to feel like we invented God just to comfort ourselves, just so we wouldn't feel so terrifyingly alone in a cruel universe. Stephen Fry once famously said that if he met God, he'd ask him why he created diseases that eat children from the inside out. He asked, "How dare you create a world in which there is such misery that is not our fault?" This pain, this grief, this crushing silence, looking at all of this and still believing, it isn't easy. Actually, it's almost impossible. Because maybe we've been looking for him in the wrong way. Maybe we've imagined God as a rescue team that is supposed to drop down the moment things go wrong. But the reality might be something far different and far more complex. But here is where the shift happens. We feel abandoned because we've spent our whole lives imagining God as a human in the sky. We've turned him into a celestial vending machine. You put in a prayer and you expect a miracle to fall out. And when the machine doesn't work, we claim it's broken. But what if our definition of help is the problem? Think about it. We want a God who stops every bullet, heals every disease, and fixes every mistake. But if God stepped in every time we faced a consequence, we wouldn't be human beings with free will. We would be pets in a cage. There's a profound quote that says, "A God you could fully understand would not be a God worth worshiping." If you have studied the universe, you know it operates on laws. Gravity doesn't stop working just because a good person falls. Fire doesn't stop burning just because an innocent child touches it. These laws are consistent. They are the truth of the physical world. And maybe, just maybe, the Creator isn't there to break those laws every time we cry, but to give us the strength to endure them. Look at the history of the most faithful people to ever live. Their lives weren't easy. They weren't rich. Most of them were persecuted, lonely, and broken. If God were a rescue team, he failed them too. But they didn't see it that way. They didn't see God as a shield from suffering. They saw him as the purpose behind the suffering. We imagine God as a king sitting on a throne watching a movie. But maybe God is more like the light in the theater. Without it, the movie couldn't exist. But the light isn't responsible for the plot. The misery we see in the world, the wars, the hunger, the greed, most of it isn't God's work. It's ours. We use the free will he gave us to destroy each other, and then we look at the sky and ask, "Why did you let me do this?" It's the ultimate irony of the human mind. We want the freedom to choose, but we don't want the responsibility of the choice. So, where does that leave us? Alone in a cold, clockwork universe? Actually, it leaves us with the only thing that has ever kept humanity moving forward: hope. Think about the most broken people you know. The ones who have lost everything, their homes, their families, their health. Logically, they should give up. Their facts tell them life is over, but they don't. They get up, they breathe, they try again. Where does that strength come from? It doesn't come from a bank account or a textbook. It comes from a deep, quiet whisper inside that says, "This isn't the end of the story." Believing in God isn't easy because it's not about finding a solution to your problems. It's about finding a meaning for them. When you look at the stars, your educated mind sees burning gas and empty space, but your soul feels something else. It feels a connection, a design, a silent presence that doesn't need to scream to be felt. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the horrors of the Holocaust, once said, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning." Maybe God doesn't stop the storm because he wants you to learn how to sail. Maybe he doesn't answer your prayer with a yes because the no is what will eventually save you. We are like ants trying to understand the blueprint of a skyscraper. We see a brick and think it's a wall. We don't see the view from the top floor. Believing in God gives you something that logic never can: the courage to be human. It gives you a reason to be kind when the world is cruel. It gives you a reason to be honest when everyone else is lying. It tells you that your life, your tiny, flickering life, actually matters. So, is it easy? No, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. You will doubt, you will cry, you will feel angry at the silence. But in that silence, if you stop talking and start listening, you might realize he was never absent. He was the strength in your hands when you thought you couldn't get up. He was the stranger who helped you for no reason. He was the quiet peace that hit you right after the worst storm of your life. God isn't what we imagined. He is far more complex, far more silent, and yet far more present. And in a world that feels like it's falling apart, that belief is the only thing that keeps us whole. Because believing is hard, but living without hope, that's actually impossible.